I have to say, guys, these reviews are so much easier to do when you win rather than lose or draw. Collingwood ended up winning the game 89-51. We held off Melbourne with their early sieges in the first half. They were incredibly wasteful. It could have been a different story. I mentioned that in the post-game show yesterday with Caleb, that if the Dees took some of their moments in front of goal, the game could have looked different. But naturally, that is sport. If you take your chances, you give yourself the best opportunity. If you don't, that can happen. Regarding yesterday, Collingwood took their chances, were very clinical relative to our last few weeks against Fremantle, Bulldogs, not taking our chances. This time we take our chances, take our moments, and score against the momentum in times, particularly in that first half, and we get the win. And what are the main takeaways from the game? Well, we beat a very proud team in the clearance battle, given the Dees' dominance over the last few years in the middle of the ground, with Max Gorn giving first use to their midfielders. Yes, Petrarca was out for the most part of the game with that rib injury, but nevertheless we got the job done in the midfield without a Scott Pendlebury, without a Jordan DeGowan, without a Tom Mitchell in there. So we had our own injury concerns in the middle of the ground and we still won. We owned the forward half when it came to the score source. We scored 10 goals within our forward half, originating in that half of the ground, which was huge. And then regarding the stoppage battle, again, we won the clearances, we won the scores from sources in that stoppage battle as well. The Dees were only limited to 17 points from stoppage scores, which is well below AFL average that typically sits at 32 points. The Collingwood pressure was omnipresent throughout the entirety of that game. We were plus 20 in tackles. We're the leading team for tackles per game. Our tackling efficiency is also very good. How many times yesterday would you see 3 or 4 Collingwood players jump on the one Dees player to force a stoppage or a hold on the ball? Even though that tackle is completed, you just get 2 or 3 other players jumping on top of the pack, if you will, to make it feel like that Dees player had a whole lot more pressure than it actually was. So it's like that perceived pressure, sort of psychological mind play, I guess, where the play's done, but more players are jumping on top of the pack to create that illusion that there was more pressure than there actually was. We've got a bunch of players to run through. Look, it was a comprehensive team performance, but there were individual performances within themselves that moulded this team-based positive outcome from the game yesterday in the King's birthday clash. Jack Crisp probably was one to get the ball rolling very early, had 27 touches in his 227th consecutive game, which I think he is second all-time on that list now, behind Adam Uze, who is currently the Richmond coach. He also had 11 contested possessions. Jeremy Howe probably had his best game in the last, I guess throughout the period of this season, he's had his best game. He had 24 touches and 3 intercept marks. Some of the spoils he had to kill the ball. His ball use was elite. I just loved every part of Jeremy Howe's game yesterday. And when you see these aging players have games like they did yesterday, it's just a testament to their pride in their game and their willingness or willpower to continue on and be a factor in this team in 2024. Just goes to show, players like Jeremy Howe still side bottom, they still want it. And those games yesterday prove that. Nathan Kruger, 3 goals, 11 touches, just looks really lively. We know he's erratic. We know he gives opposition hell when he's on the ground. It doesn't matter if the ball's in the air, if it's on at ground level, he's going to find a way to have an impact. He finds a way to stay involved in the game, which I've said many times before, that's the glaring difference between Ash Johnson and Nathan Kruger. It's the fact that Kruger can stay busy in many ways, whereas Ash Johnson, if he's not taking his pretty marks and kicking nice goals, there's not a lot there left to be desired for Ash Johnson, unfortunately. Whereas Kruger, he's just a blue-collar working type of player. And he actually looks quite fast. I didn't realise, I've watched him before, I've watched him live at training, I've seen him in games, but this time around, he just looks very fast off the mark. So, yeah, he's got a spot in the team. He's here to stay. He could definitely be a part of like a three-pronged forward line with Brody Myercheck, maybe Dan McStay and Kruger, or that could also look like Brody Myercheck, Mason Cox, Nathan Kruger. Either or, I'm not too fast. I'm very happy with his performance, and I guess the overarching outcome is the fact that he didn't get injured. He got through the entirety of the game and can build on his positive game against the Dees into North Melbourne at Marvel and just get to the bye, and then he can sort of have like a mini break, I guess, and so you build that conditioning over these 2 weeks, the Melbourne game and the North game. Have a little break, let your body rest, adapt to the conditioning that he's thrown himself into and thrusted himself into mid-year, and then come back fresh, better for it against Gold Coast away. I feel like the silver lining in Nick Dacos being tagged quite well by Alex Neil-Bullen is the fact that we won without him. The last 5-6 weeks, it's always been Nick Dacos best on by far and away, having an impact at stoppage, kicking goals, doing whatever he wanted as he pleased, breaking records, club records, Nathan Buckley's records, long-standing records. But yesterday he only had 15 touches, kicked 1 goal assist. He still had a game high 7 clearances, which was funny considering his impact was nullified. But he still did well. But it just felt like Nick Dacos would chime in every now and then, but he wasn't active throughout the entire game because of that tag. And you'd hardly notice him until he would kick that goal, until he switched that ball over into, I forget who it was, in the forward line where he just injured his shin. But yeah, it was really positive to see that Collingwood can, at times, play without a Nick Dacos, without him firing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the injuries. Like, we're missing that many A-grade players in our team right now, and to beat a fully, relatively healthy Melbourne Demons side with Jake Lever out and then obviously Petrarca throughout the game, I think we're doing pretty well. Some of those younger players just, they really stepped up. I felt like Finlay McRae in the first half really asserted his dominance, had 16 touches for the game, kicked a goal, and I think when the game was up for grabs, he was one of our best players in my opinion. And such is the sports world. Last week, we're calling for Finlay McRae to get dropped. Does he have a spot at Collingwood anymore? Is he just going to be a perennial VFL player and never be able to transition his VFL form to AFL form? Well, I guess if we had availability in the midfield, he wouldn't have been playing yesterday, I don't think. However, because of the bunch of injuries we have at Collingwood right now, Finlay McRae was, I guess, fortunate enough to have another opportunity at AFL level because of our lack of availability. And what's more than Finlay McRae getting another opportunity this week, it was the fact that he rolled into the midfield quite a bit. He had a 50-50 split. In previous games, he was forced to try and find his way into the game through the half-forward flank position. Yesterday was different. He was thrusted into the midfield and had immediate impact. He looked really good out of the centre bounce, kicked that goal. So a really positive outcome for Finlay McRae, and he lives to fight another day. So we're really happy for that for Finlay McRae. How good is Harvey Harrison? Kicked those 3 goals at crucial times. I was listening to some of the interviews post-game by some of the Collingwood players and Fly McRae. They say Harrison is that type of player, whereas if he has a bad game or a lesser game like he did last week, it really dwells on him, and he uses that as motivation to really bounce back and takes it real personal. So he's got that fight in him, and he bounces back immediately this week, kicks another 3 goals. That's the second time he's kicked 3 goals this season in basically his breakout year. He's averaging a goal a game as a wingman, which I don't know if any other wingman is doing it in the league right now. I'd highly doubt it. So, place to stay for Harvey. Great running patterns, kicking goals, young. It's just the type of player we needed as we are getting a little bit older in our squad at the moment. And no one could have foreseen Harvey Harrison being a mainstay in our squad this year, I don't think. There were talks that we were quite optimistic that he would have a position in the squad at some point over the next few years. But no, I don't think anybody thought Harvey Harrison would take the league by storm in the fashion that he has this early on in 2024. Am I right or wrong? I feel like Charlie Dean played his best game for Collingwood. He was forced into difficult positions as a backman and won out in some of those important contests. He had 2 intercept marks, was quite clean with the ball and ticked all the boxes. So that's a real positive for Charlie Dean. Billy Frampton still in the forward line. Obviously, Howe remained forward. I thought the idea of Jeremy Howe remaining in a back line for this game would be handy versus the forward profile that the Dees had. They weren't super tall and super imposing, so I thought that would probably be better suited rather than bringing Billy Frampton back, which happened. But in saying that, what do we do with the Billy Frampton later in the year, does he remain in the squad as a forward? Probably not. If there's going to be a spot in the final series for Billy Frampton, it will be in the backline. I'm a little bit concerned that it'll be a sort of similar John Noble story where Billy Frampton will play the most part of the year, but when we're fit and firing, if he doesn't have a spot in the backline, I just can't see him playing forward line with the likes of Myercheck, McStay, Kruger, Mason Cox all up and about. I'm not too sure where that one goes. So let me know what your thoughts are, guys, about that in the comment section. Some of the moments I'd like to talk about in that game, the first one being that transition goal where we could have killed it for a rush behind with Jeremy Howe, but they opted to keep it in. They kick it out to the 50. Hoskin and Elliott takes that screamer. That got everybody up and about. And then we kicked it to Billy Frampton, and then I think it was Frampton, to Bobby Hill, and then Bobby Hill centres it to Kruger, and Kruger kicks his first goal in the AFL, as BT had indicated in the set shot routine, or during Kruger's set shot routine. Was BT on something yesterday? Because some of his calls are woeful. I think he's had his time at commentary level, at AFL commentary level. I think there needs to be a change of the guard, because I'm not sure if the old age is getting to him, but something's not quite right. Himself and Kelly Underwood, don't get me started. We'll save that for another day. But yeah, I really love that moment for Krugs. Kicking that goal really got the ball rolling for him in the game. The next moment we have to bring up is that Bobby Hill versus Cozzy Pickett moment on the wing by the boundary. We know Bobby's a dazzler. He loves stepping his players, but I thought this was one step too far against probably the worst player you'd want to run into when it comes to a tackling duel. He runs into Cozzy Pickett. I thought Cozzy had him all wrapped up, and then all of a sudden you just see Bobby ground Cozzy Pickett to the floor and then go on his merry way and do what he does best and just dispose of it. Yeah, I love that. That caught me by surprise, the fact that Bobby was able to drop Cozzy Pickett, but that was one of the biggest moments in the game for me. The other obvious one was the cheers for Braden Maynard in spite of all those boos that the Dees were, I guess, shouting out during the game. It just embodies what the Collingwood Army is all about. That 23rd player on the field is the fans, and supporting someone like Brazzy through those moments just shows what type of club we are. And Craig McRae mentioned in his post-game presser that Brazzy has been dealing with something off-field. I think as recent as this week, I think things started to eventuate off-field. He said it's very unfortunate what he's going through, but he won't disclose it. Obviously, keeping it confidential, as you should. Keep it internal, but whatever Brazzy is battling off-field, what he did on the ground yesterday, in a hostile environment where we remember what happened in that qualifying final, the Melbourne fans were always going to come at him, but for the Collingwood Army to get behind him and show him that we've got his back, that was massive. And how about Sidey? He's still got legs on him. Anybody say that Specky in that third quarter, I think it was, third quarter? Yeah. Has anyone seen a Specky in side bottoms lifetime, maybe early on in his career? I'm not too sure. Let me know. I would love to see another side bottom Specky from the past, but that was the first time I ever saw side bottom get on someone's shoulders. Unfortunately, didn't kick that goal, but we'll take the Specky. And by the way, guys, by the end of the third quarter, Sidey was the leading runner on the ground offensively and defensively for kilometres accrued. So the talks of Sidey not having his legs in him anymore, you see him take that Specky, you see him leading the running capacity for the most part of 3 quarters. I think he finished 4th for total kilometres ran in that game, but he was number 1 throughout the first 3 quarters where the game was still up for grabs. So yeah, all these talks of him being too old, too slow, probably not warranted just yet. I think Fly said in his post-game presser, he's still got legs on him and he's still got a little bit more to go with us, suggesting that he backs Sidey and will continue to have Sidey in the side, mind the pun if that even is a pun, until he shows that he's lost it, and he hasn't. He's played well, hasn't played as well as he did last year, obviously, but I think we trust the process, similar to someone like Jeremy Howe, who was struggling early in the year. Jack Crisp was struggling early in the year, probably was close to being dropped, really. He played as a sub against Brisbane, and maybe if Crisp's consecutive record wasn't standing then, maybe he would have got dropped for that Brisbane game. but he came on as that sub in that Brisbane game and just turned his season around. I think there's going to be a moment where Sidey, he's not playing horrible, but he's not playing great, I would say. But there's going to be a moment where he has that good game, gets his confidence back, particularly in his disposal. I think his biggest knock-on at the moment is his disposal use, because we're so accustomed to seeing his elite ball use off the wing. We're not quite seeing that. But he did play wing on Monday and hasn't played there in probably over a month. He was pushed into the halfback flank, but now they've moved the magnets, some would say, and he's reverted back to that wingman role where he's more accustomed with. They feel like the halfback flank project has probably expired, and Sidey's best position, it seems, is wing. Worst case scenario, does Fly thrust him into the forward line at some point? Who knows? But hopefully Sidey can hold his own on the wing. His running is not going to hold him back. Did anybody see Jeremy Howe's time wasting? No, I didn't think so. It was when he had the ball, ran out the boundary, and then gave it to a fan in the crowd. You'd think if the umpires want to be consistent, they would have seen that. Don't they pay that? I mean, if you look at the game against Fremantle, the way Lockie Sullivan got penalised, if you want to be consistent umpires, wouldn't you pay the free kick for time wasting for handing it to a fan in the crowd? Or did the umpire shy away from it because Howe was essentially giving the fan a moment by giving the I think it was a young lady or young boy, giving him the ball in that moment would have meant a lot for that fan, and it would have been hindered if the umpire called a free kick. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and I think there's a lack of consistency. However, the game was fairly adjudicated, I thought they did quite well. But that was just my little qualm on the side. Some of the VFL impressions from that game against Casey. Collingwood did lose, unfortunately. As I've said before, the VFL side are stretched for AFL players. We're having less than a handful of players represent Collingwood at VFL level right now because of the amount of injuries we have that we're trying to cover for. But Harry Dees played his best game off the halfback flank. He had 23 touches, kicked a goal, was dubbed as the coach's MVP. So there's probably going to be an opportunity for Harry Dees somewhere across the line this year. TJ was the unused emergency, so he didn't play in this VFL game because had there been an injury in the AFL side leading up to the game yesterday, TJ would have been the next man up. He's been playing very well. So those are probably the two closest players at VFL level who could make a senior debut for the AFL side. Iluru Smith played, had 4 touches, did some okay things in the ruck, very raw, very athletic, however, good at ground level, multiple efforts, so probably just more of a project at this point. And then we had Luke Quaynor, who's from the NGA, the Next Generation Academy, I think that's what it's called. Had another quiet game, second VFL game for the year after last week against Footscray. Just another player who probably will get picked up by Collingwood in the draft. I don't see Luke Quaynor featuring in the top 40 of the draft, which means we don't have to, he's probably someone that won't go in the top 40 of the draft, which means if he's taken outside the 40 or if a club takes him after pick 40, we can match their bid. However, if he was to fall in the top 40 and Collingwood weren't to take him with one of our early picks, then we wouldn't be able to match it. Similar to Jath, he was a Hawthorn NGA player, and because we took him at pick 37, Hawthorn couldn't match the bid because it wasn't a pick outside the 40. But like I said, Luke Quaynor was probably not a player that will fall within the early picks, particularly the first 40, so we should be able to match a pick for him outside of that first 40. Ash Johnson had 11 touches, 1 goal, so he's just got to keep doing his best and try have a big game in the VFL to give himself a chance at AFL level. But with the sudden rise of Nathan Kruger, it just makes the task even more difficult for someone like Ash Johnson. We had Reef McInnes, who played a bit of midfield time in the VFL. I think Caleb said he featured in probably 40% of those centre bounces, had 16 touches. I think the idea behind that is the fact that Reef actually was initially drafted to Collingwood as a midfielder. He's quite fast, was in the top 10 for the 20-metre dash in the draft combine of his draft year. And with the amount of injuries we have to Tom Mitchell, obviously we heard with that plantar fascia surgery, he'll be out even longer. Scott Pendlebury, Jordan De Goey, so on and so forth. I think there might be a chance for Reef in the midfield, and I think they're just being proactive in case that is needed. Or maybe as well, they're probably not satisfied with the output they get from Reef in the forward line and want to see if they can squeeze the most juice out of him in the midfield. It might be an opportunity for him at some point this year. Finlay McRae plays well yesterday, so maybe that changes the conversation. But it's just Collingwood, I guess, sort of flirting with what sort of looks they can get from certain types of players who they probably haven't gotten maximum output from just yet. And Reef McInnes is probably one of those players. Lastly, Ed Allen, 19 touches, and Will Parker, 18 touches. So they did do their bit in that game. They did lose, as I said, but yeah, some really positive outcomes in regards to players like Reef and Di Mattia from the VFL. The only injury concerns that come out of that game against the Demons was obviously Nick Shin. He got a knock in that third quarter, and I think he actually got a knock on the outside of his shin in the fourth quarter. So when that happened, Collingwood just like, all right, well, the game's iced. Let's wrap Nick up in cotton wool and get Jack Bytel out there and call it a day. So Nick, in that post-game interview, he said, yeah, all good, just precautionary. So hopefully he's ready to suit up for that North Melbourne game next Sunday at Marvel. Jeez, what a dreadful fixture. What a dreadful fixture that is. But just so happens to be that North Melbourne are coming off their first win of the year against West Coast in front of a difficult crowd to play against. They were up by 33 points in the last quarter, and then West Coast completely turned that around, got up, and then North Melbourne found a way to persevere and overcome that and develop some maturity and claw that game back somehow. Despite that suspect call on Elliot Yeo dragging the ball in, North got the win, and they're going to take that confidence, that winning confidence, into this game against Collingwood. And we've just got to be mindful, just got to be ready for anything that North throw against us. I think it was in 2022 at the G, Collingwood were down by 4 goals at three-quarter time against North Melbourne, a similar side that will feature on Sunday. So got to have our tails up early and put them to bed as quickly as possible. Sunday, 3:20 at Marvel. Don't love that, but you got to do it. And then we get the bye, and we'll have a bunch of players, hopefully, ready to return and have a really good run, starting with Gold Coast away. Until then, guys, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.